Welcome back. Well, you've now watched, hopefully, the second week of Breakthrough with Tony Robbins, and I am Tony Robbins, and so I'm here to give you your breakthrough this week, a chance for you to take what you experienced in this show and say, how do I apply this to my own life? It's wonderful to see how this couple turned their life around and went from financial destruction, losing each other, losing their kids, being pulled apart, all the anger and the frustration, the hate and stress and upset, to a place where they're deeply in love, they're turning things around, their kids are in great shape, and they really have that love and affection and passion and respect for each other, one another. But what about me? What about you? Well, this week, what I really want to form a focus on is, think about our first session with Frank and Kristen. If you got a lesson from that session, my hope is that you got the idea that, you know what, I have no problems. And what I mean by that is I have problems, but they're solvable. If a man and a woman can go through what Frank and Kristen went through, where on their wedding night, they have their entire life taken from them, suddenly he becomes a quadriplegic, and they can be that happy, then what excuse do I have to deal with financial stress or health stresses or relationship stresses? There is no excuse. What you hopefully got was we develop emotional patterns, a pattern of getting angry, and that's where we go, or a pattern of being sad or fearful or worried, or some people have the pattern of being playful or being passionate or being more determined. That was what the first session was about. So when we talk about a breakthrough, we're really talking about what is it that can change your whole world. A breakthrough is that moment in time, once again, where suddenly the impossible becomes possible. And it's not some fake positive thinking thing. It's because suddenly somebody got through to you, or you got through to yourself. You got an insight, or you told yourself the truth, or maybe you learned a new strategy, or maybe you just got sick and tired of being sick and tired, and you just suddenly, something inside you clicked, and you said no more, and you stepped up and you did something to change your life. That's the point of this session. So let's look at another element that keeps you from having the quality of life you deserve. What's something else that holds us back, that keeps us stuck, that takes away the quality of our lives? And the answer is extreme stress. Now, when I say extreme stress, I'm almost flipping over it because I think about what that really means. I mean, extreme stress is suddenly you lose your job. Suddenly you're told you have a tumor in your brain. Suddenly you're told you're going to lose something that you value immensely, or someone got the promotion you didn't, or maybe an event happens, a hurricane comes, an oil spill, God forbid. Something outside your control occurs. Extreme stress can happen when somebody gets mugged. Extreme stress happens when something happens within a family that no one wants to talk about and they can't deal with it. Whenever we find ourselves in a place where the things that are most important to us seem to be withheld or even could be withheld in the future, we go to extreme stress. How do you deal with it? The real secret is today, people almost expect to have stress, don't they? We're in kind of a season of stress around the world. Since the economic meltdown and the change that's happened in the economy, as we all know, it's the worst we've seen in almost 100 years, 80 years for sure. It's happening all over the world. So people stress has become part of the language of their life. It's almost like you expect it to be there when you wake up in the morning for most people. Time stress for sure, demand stress, things I've got to do. And especially in a world now where we've created all this artificial stress of things we have to do that we don't have to do. You don't have to go to your Facebook page and answer all those questions. You don't have to tweet everything, right? You don't have to answer your cell phone every moment. But we've created a world where there's constant stimulus, constant demand, and the sense that we're out of control. So however you get to extreme stress, whether it be a stacking of a bunch of small things or whether it be one big event, how you deal with stress determines the quality of your life. I mean, obviously, anybody can do well when everything's going your way. The real question of what's going to shape the quality of your life, shape the quality of your family or your destiny, is really how do you deal with those problem times? Do you use stress or does stress use you? Because most of us have forgotten there's two types of stress. There's distress, which is what most people are talking about when they're really in these tight states. And there's eustress. Eustress is where stress is a force that makes you grow. See, everyone can respond to the same stimulus differently. One person is told they lost their job, and I was driving by to come to the studio today, and along the freeway I saw a little sign there, and it's Warner Brothers. And Warner Brothers was the people that made all these incredible cartoons in the early days that so many people were familiar with. And there were two guys that worked for Warner Brothers that were their top cartoonists. They created some of their best characters, and one day they had a downsizing at Warner Brothers years and years and years ago. And these guys, had no jobs, had no future. There was no one else to go to. There was no competitor to really be against Warner Brothers at the time. So what do? They created their own little group. Their guys' names are Hanna and Barbera. And if you're familiar with them, they created everything you can possibly imagine in cartoons that you probably watched when you were a kid. These guys took the stress of losing their job and converted it into the most successful business that dethroned their previous employers. Some people take stress and they get crushed. Some people take stress and they just grow like crazy. Do you take stress as a source of struggle or a source of strength? Most people, the obvious answer is struggle. So how do we deal with that? Well, part of what we wanted you to see in this show was that the stresses that people take are quite physical. When you start thinking, this person doesn't love me, or we don't have the money, or we can't make these things happen, it doesn't just end intellectually, it ends up in our bodies. In fact, research shows that the human brain can't tell the difference between a physical stress, like when I had these two, go up in that airplane and have 5 G's of physical stress, a stress that's pushing on their brain, their body. Can't tell the difference between that and psychological stress. To the body, they're exactly the same. And the consequences can be everything from high blood pressure to a heart attack, people having every kind of form of problem from skin eruptions to depression. Much of the pain, physical pain that shows up in our life is started in the source of just stressing out. And where does stress come from? It's perception. Whenever people say they're suffering, one of the things I learned years ago from a brilliant man who was based in the East, he said, Tony, suffering is never in the fact. It's always in the perception of the facts. He said, in other words, you might feel this tremendous pain, and the facts may be true. It may be true that your mother has died, or your father has died, or you lost your savings. That may be true, but your suffering is not because you lost your mom, it's because you think you shouldn't have. Your suffering is based in the meaning that you used to believe she was close to you and now she's passed, so you don't feel like you could ever be with her again. If you change what things mean, you change how you feel. Meaning and emotion are tied together, and as we talked about in our first session, how you feel determines the quality of your life. 2 people can have the same experience. One person comes up with the meaning their life is over. The other person comes to the meaning, look, this is a brand new beginning, baby. It's time to rock and roll. That ability to deal with stress is so critical. Now, the reason I wanted to bring it out in this particular story is after watching Frank and Kristen, which is so extreme, unfortunately, the story here that you see is too common. You find yourself in a position here where when you look up and you see Ron and you see this man's face and you see Marie, you see, unfortunately, a good part of America. You see so many people that feel like they've lost their job. It wasn't their fault. They worked really hard. In Ron's case, he didn't give up. Ron stepped up and took his life savings, as you well know, and invested in this franchise. But who could have predicted that in 2008 we would take the biggest drop in the economy's history? He picks the unemployment business, or I should say the employment business, trying to take the unemployed and employ them, but at a time when companies really aren't hiring. And even when he did his job right, they didn't pay him all the money. They said, look, we don't have enough money, we'll give you 1/3 of your fee. And he had to accept it. And sure enough, he couldn't support the business and he went under. So the surface source of stress seems to be they're losing their home, they can't pay their bills, they're behind on everything, and the outside stress, the surface, makes it look like it's all about money. But is it? As you watched, you probably saw what I do. I look for not the surface level problem, but the deeper problem. There was a problem here way beyond this, and it was a problem that these 2 people were divided. These 2 people were letting the external stress push them further and further apart, and they didn't even know each other anymore. You see, when you get enough stress in a relationship, an interesting thing happens. You change what you associate to your partner. And what happens so often, think of it this way. If 2 people are in a relationship and things are going really, really great, really fantastic, you both are, let's say your life is going great for you and your partner, person you're dating or you're together with, everything's going great in their life. Life is the way you want it to be, and then you come together in these peak states. Well, when 2 people are in great state and they see each other, great state, see each other, great state, see each other, pretty soon when you see each other, you go in a great state. So it's not hard to have a great relationship when 2 people are feeling great. But if this is feeling really great, and it's a huge drop down to feeling okay, 2 people are feeling okay, what kind of relationship are they going to have after a period of time? Not hard to figure out. I feel okay, I look at you, you feel okay, you look at me, how's it going? Okay. And I'm using this as a metaphor, obviously, but after a while it's like, our relationship's good. This is good. This is great. This is good. Now, after a while, let's say things happen that have nothing to do with each other. The economy really hits one person really hard. The other person feels really bad because they're having challenges, let's say, with their family or with their kids, whatever. Now you have two people way down here, and they're feeling really lousy. They feel really poor. They feel frustrated. They feel angry. They see each other. They're angry. It's not with each other. They're just frustrated with their life. And they're frustrated and they see each other, and they're frustrated and they see each other, they're angry and they see each other, and they're stressed and they see each other. What's going to happen to the communication style between these two people? What's going to happen to this relationship if both people stay in this really stressed place? It's not too hard to figure out. The relationship's in deep danger. I'll give you one more option. It's pretty obvious. Both people feeling great, great relationship. Both people feeling okay, okay relationship, good. Both people feeling lousy, stressed, pissed off, frustrated, fearful, you got a problem in this relationship. People are going to say things in that state of mind to each other. They're going to do things. They're going to be unconscious. And people don't forget. And it stacks. And then that stress gets stronger and stronger. And we try to blame something. We don't want to blame each other. We'll blame the economy. We'll blame our boss. But eventually we tend to blame each other, and then things start to really break down. What if one person's in a great state? Their life's going great, and the other person's doing terrible. Then what happens? Well, the person's feeling great, wants this person to feel great. They try to encourage them. But if they can't make them feel great, after a while, this person may resent, damn, I'm finally doing okay. Why can't they be happy with me? You have another challenge. So you say, Tony, well, why are you telling me all this? Because the quality of your life is the quality of your relationships. If you want to have a great life and you make a lot of money, do well at business, but you don't have great friendships, you don't have great family, and you don't have great intimacy, you're not going to be very happy very long. Human relationship is where we magnify human emotion. So if you accept what we said in the first session, that the quality of your life is how you feel, that if you got $1 billion, but every day you live in the feeling of being stressed out or frustrated or lonely or guilty or whatever, then your life is stressed out, lonely, and guilty. Doesn't matter that you've got the greatest kids in the world. Doesn't matter that you have someone who loves you. Doesn't matter that you are very successful in your business or your life. None of that matters. What matters is where you live emotionally. Then if you want to know what affects your emotion more than anything else, you and I both know what it is. All the research shows your life can be messed up in a lot of ways. But if you don't like who you're with, if you don't love them, if you don't have joy with them, if you don't have excitement with them, the quality of your life virtually is destroyed. People leave businesses because they don't like who they have to work with. Some people work harder, 10 times harder, because people feel like they have a common mission. They love each other, they respect each other, they care for each other. And you can see that difference in a team where there's a real relationship versus a group of people that are just there to get the job done and they barely know each other. They basically follow the rules and get the job done. It's a different universe to live in. One is a place you want to be, the other is a place you go to work. That's a very different world. If you want to have a world that you're happy with, then your relationship has got to be at a different level, which means you've got to cherish and work hard to constantly increase the quality of the state you live in. In other words, you have to be able to take that hit from life and of course feel it, but still bring yourself back up in a state where you have something to give. Bring yourself back to a place where you can lift up the people around you. I know you saw Frank do that in the first episode when he shifted and suddenly his wife didn't have to try and take care of him all the time. When he looked at her and he penetrated her and said, baby, I'm here for you. Instead of saying, oh, I'm a quadriplegic, he forgot about himself and said, you know what? My woman needs me and I'm there for her. He got out of himself, reached out, and with his eyes, his heart, his words, his mouth, his state, his emotion, he took her from crying, if you remember, to giggling in a couple of minutes. That's the power we have. We can change our state no matter what's happened to us. That experience of changing his wife's quality of life and changing his own quality of life, that breakthrough that Frank had, only happened because he gave up the blame game. Where was Frank before? Do you remember in that first show? I'm assuming you watched both these shows. If you didn't, go back and do it. You can watch it on Hulu, right? Make sure you watch the show because the show gives you the foundation so you and I can have this conversation and we can look at our own lives and change it all. But going back to that first show with Frank, there was that moment. Where was he before that moment? His whole life was in a prison. And the prison was based on the belief that his life was over because his wife had to take care of him and he could do nothing for her. He was blaming himself. That's why he couldn't find the answers. When you play the blame game, when you criticize, when you attack yourself or someone else or something else, you have no power to change your life. But it was this incredible moment where all of a sudden he started to realize, hey, it doesn't matter if I'm, quote, in this chair. This chair doesn't define me. I can have the quality of life. I can make this happen. And you saw that breakthrough happen again and again. He couldn't blame the chair for a limitation. It was really his ability to find a way to give, his way to get himself in a stronger state of mind. And when his state changed, so did his wife, even though their conditions hadn't changed. Do you get it? Their conditions were the same, but they were in a different state of mind. They could have been home before, pissed off and angry and frustrated, with Frank totally mobile. But now here Frank has these supposed modifications, and yet in this state of mind, he's got a better relationship with his wife than he had before. Kristen, on the other hand, before, she was also playing the blame game, blaming herself, maybe blaming the universe. How could this happen to us? And feeling that same sense that there was no sense that her life had any power. So how does this relate to the show we just watched, and how does it relate to us? Well, if you just saw Ron and Marie, you saw that, again, you had two people blaming everything. Blaming the economy, blaming each other, blaming themselves. And that blame game is a prison. And I know that sounds overly simplistic, but if you want to change the quality of your life, the first breakthrough is stop playing the blame game with anybody, yourself or anybody else. Stop playing the surface game. We all have problems, and there's going to be more. I'm not Mr. Positive Thinking here to tell you, oh, watch these little tapes and there'll be no more challenges. I'm here to say you're going to have extreme stress in the future. If you don't have it now, it's coming, right? Sorry to be so blank and direct, but it's true. But see, that stress can be a source of strength for you if you just make those filters, those perceptual filters that allow you to take back the power of your life. You have no power when something or someone else is responsible. And always it looks that way on the surface. On the surface, when you watch the show, I'm sure you said, oh my God, this is like so many families, or this is our family. So many families, something was done to them outside their control. He worked for 23 years, Ron, for the same company. He gave his heart and soul. He wasn't a casual employee. He was one of the most liked and respected executives there. But when they went through the downsizing, he was so efficient in his security systems, a lot of technology took over, and boom, he was the person you could make redundant. But again, the guy's a fighter. He didn't give up. He took his money. He invested. He tried to figure out what to do. He got trained. He retooled. He went out in the business, but picked the wrong season for that particular business. And if you do the right thing at the wrong time, you don't get rewarded. You get pain. If you plant in the summertime, it doesn't work. If you buy a home, right thing to do. Buying it in 2006, wrong time, at least in North America. So you've paid a big price. Many of us, the only way you learn often is by experience. We don't know what's coming. Hindsight's always 20/20. So we can blame the economy. We can blame, the legislators. We can blame the people who are playing with interest rates. You can blame all that. And certainly they may play a role, but the quality of your life and mine, whether you be Frank or whether you be Ron, whether you be Kristen or Marie, that's something we can only take back when we get beyond the surface. The surface is always something on the outside that's affecting us. It does affect us, but we have the ultimate choice of deciding what it means. And when you decide what something means, you instantaneously change the story of your life and the emotion that you feel, and therefore the quality of your life, which is what this is about. Breaking through to a greater quality of life, regardless of what you can't control. We can't control the outside world. We can't. We can influence it, but we can't control it. But we have absolute control of this world, the one inside here, the one between your ears and in your heart. And when you take control of that, the game changes. But I'll tell you what, you'll never do it when you get caught up in a blame game with a person who's closest to you. Your lover, your husband, your wife, your children, your mother, your father, your best friend, your boss, somebody who's there. If you get stuck in that game, you will feel like you're at the effect of everything. And all of us hate that. We can deal with almost any stress, but being out of control, that one makes people nuts. Research shows, you can make people nuts really easy. All you got to do is put them in a room and have a random buzzer go off at any time that they can't control for days and days and days, and they start to go nuts. If they feel like they can go turn that buzzer off, even if it happens all the time, they might get angry and frustrated, but they don't go crazy. We need to have control, and it's the illusion that we control life that makes us nuts. Trying to control other people. We can't control our own perceptions and meaning. Think about it. We can't control the weather. We control what the weather means to us. We can't control the events, but we can always control the meaning. And with the control of meaning, you take the control of your life. I hope I don't sound redundant, but it's the truth. I know you know this in your soul. And so part of why I made these stories, I made these I think of it as a documentary because it's not reality TV, it's the real thing. We didn't fake this. These people are real. What they went through is real. Is I wanted you to see what the surface problem was, and I was hoping you watched and saw the real problem. I'm sure you did. You know, it looks like it's a money problem. That's the surface. And by the way, how do people deal with problems usually? On the surface. How do you know it's a surface approach? Well, most people try to ignore the problem, or maybe they try to forget the problem. You know, go eat something, go watch TV, you know, go get involved with some other challenge, go talk about somebody else, gossip, anything to get away from dealing with your problem. So ignore it and forget about it. It's the first way. The other way you know that people are dealing with a problem on the surface is that they're blaming something, an event, other people, or even yourself. Blaming yourself is not the same as taking back control. Blaming yourself just makes you feel bad, like I screwed up, I messed up. That's not, you're gonna feel so bad, you're not gonna have an emotional state to help anybody else. You're gonna be going down here and you won't be able to help your partner, much less help yourself. I knew I had to break them out of this game and get them to go deep. How do you go deep? Well, you stop the criticism. I'll tell you something, the impact of criticism in a relationship is greater than any of us know. It sounds so light, so simple. Anybody can criticize, but it's when the person you love most in the world criticizing you, telling you that who you are and what you do is wrong all the time, that stacking inside the human heart and soul is pretty brutal. In fact, Dr. Gottman is probably the greatest student, and I say student because I think all of us that are teachers have to be students. Maybe he's the best teacher. He's been studying at least more couples than anyone alive for a longer period of time. It's the University of Washington. He's had, I think now almost 65,000, maybe it's now 100,000 couples he studied. And I'm talking about with cameras watching them for weeks in rooms like a reality TV show. And he's gotten to watch the patterns. And the guy has a 92% accuracy in being able to tell you whether you and your partner will make it or not, whether you will stay married. And all he needs is a 5-minute conversation between the two of you and watch you. How does he do that? Well, he's learned all of these little tools, and he's basically come up with what he calls the 4 horsemen, that basically when these 4 are there, that relationship is going down. 92% accuracy of whether your marriage is going to make it or not. And he's been doing it here for, I guess, almost 40 years. Well, those 4 horsemen start with criticism. Now, what are you saying, Tony? I'm supposed to just accept whatever my spouse says to me? I should just put up with what they're doing? I should just pretend I'm happy all the time? No, I'm not into the BS positive thinking, fake it stuff. I never have been. I'm saying to you instead, you have every right to be upset. You can even complain, just don't criticize. What's the difference? Marie was criticizing. I know, many of you didn't like her in the beginning. It's like, she seems like such a, and there were multiple metaphorical examples that people gave me when they watched this, and I showed it to them before it aired. And people didn't like her. They said, look, she's so unjust, she's so unfair. And so a lot of people blame Marie for the problem. She should have gone to work. Other people looked at him and said, he's an idiot, you know? How could he blow away their entire life savings? You know, how come he didn't follow through? And how come he's not supporting his wife? Plus, look what he says to her. Like, if you go get a job, it'd be a better situation. After all, you're just doing these piddly things like taking care of the kids. Ooh, if you watch the show, you know how upsetting that was, even to me with him. But the point is, the blaming thing back and forth didn't change anything. See, all the criticism that people do of celebrities, you see it every day. People watch television, they read newspapers, they go on the web to find out what's the latest thing about somebody that criticizing somebody famous. Why do we fall in this trap? Because underneath it all, we all have these deep fears that at some level we're not enough, and that if I'm not enough, I won't be loved. If I'm not beautiful enough, strong enough, smart enough, fast enough, funny enough, right, spiritual enough, a good enough mother, a good enough father, a good enough friend, top athlete, whatever it is, the better person in business or sales or negotiation or marketing or whatever the case may be, internet. Today, all human beings have the same fears they've always had. We all want love more than anything on earth, and we all believe we have to be enough. We have to be some way or be someone to be that way. So there's 2 ways to really be enough. One is to take risks and try to do something. Try to accomplish something, try to make something happen. But to do that means taking risks. You could fail, and if you fail and other people see it, or you do, you might start looking like, well, you're not good enough, you're not strong enough, you're not enough, you're not worthy of love. That's the equivalent for most people of psychological death, to feel worthless and unloved. What's worse? Very little in life. So for most people, a lot of people can deal without food, but they can't deal without feeling like something in life matters, that they matter to someone, that they're loved by something or someone, at least themselves or God or something, their creator. So this process, really what I do with people is to help them to break out of that illusion, break out of that mindset that says there has to be something to blame or I'm not enough. Instead, it's about saying when you get to this relationship in your life, that relationship that you have great relationships with usually is a friendship because you don't have many rules. Friends just stick by. They can make mistakes. You're saying they're having a bad day. But if it's the person you're in an intimate relationship with, you got all these other rules of how they're supposed to be. I'm saying to you, today might be the day to change your whole life and have a breakthrough in any relationship. If you don't have a relationship, it's probably because you're afraid. You're afraid of being rejected. You're afraid of someone not loving you, so don't even get too close. Or you'll say, no, I'm just so busy with work, or all the good ones are gone. You know and I know that's all BS, that's all a story. If you want to change your life, the way you change your life is you stop making this mindset happen that says, I gotta be a certain way, and instead, you figure out what you can give. Frank figured out what to give his lady, in spite of the fact he was in a chair, and then he was free. You see, Ron suddenly find out he can have something to give his lady. He couldn't turn the finances around yet. But when I took those two and we put them down on the streets, and suddenly they were homeless, what you may not know is that I worked with him in a dance and we had him do some self-defense training so that he knew he could take care of her. Didn't make it in the film because it was a 30-day journey. But I did. I didn't just throw him down in the street. And you might think, well, there's cameras around. It was dangerous as heck. We had hidden cameras on the piece. These people were sitting and they're sleeping on the street and going through what they're going through. And the beauty was, Ron was there. Suddenly, Ron felt like he was worthy. He could do something for his woman. He could succeed finally. And she felt like she needed him. And you watched them come together. The criticism disappeared, and everything was about how do we support each other. And that was the whole theme here. The whole theme was if we put these people together, they'll get what they really want. They can deal with the other problems if together they love and connect with each other, if they stop blaming each other. They can also get their kids to feel safe. How do you think kids feel when their parents are constantly at it with each other? And if they put that together, they can also get their act together and start turning their finances around as well. But we had to create an environment. And you might have to do the same thing too. You might have to get out of the environment you're in to create something new. So here's what I want you to get. If you want to go deep, you got to stop blaming. And so what's the opposite of blaming? It's questioning. See, the only way you get really upset, the only way to really be frustrated and angry and all those different emotions you might feel with your partner or even with yourself is you have to believe your own thoughts. What do I mean by that? Well, I stumble on it because you think about it, most of us think whatever we believe is just true. But haven't you had some beliefs in the past that maybe at one time in your life you just believed heart and soul, you would even fought for those beliefs, but you look back on it now and you're almost embarrassed that you believe that damn stuff, right? And most people have. I bet you do too. So if you think about a thought and you believe it enough, like, she shouldn't treat me that way, or, Ron, he should have done this, or Marie, she should do that. The more you have these statements about how people should be, and you believe it's true, the more angry you get, the more frustrated you get with your partner or with your boss or whoever you're dealing with. So one of the questions I've learned to ask myself is, instead of accepting, whenever I'm upset, I know some part of me is judging. It's very hard, nearly impossible, to influence somebody while you're judging them, because they can feel it. So one of the reasons I can work with people is hard to judge them because I've been such an idiot in so many areas, and I've gotten a little smarter in some areas of my life, so I can relate instead of judge. If I haven't done what they've done, I've done something probably equally silly or stupid, so I can't be silly or stupid, I've done it too. Anything you'd be upset with your partner about, I guarantee you've done something, if not similar, something that would have equally silly or stupid impact if you're being fair with that person. So I have a friend that years ago, I used to ask this question to people. I'd always say, they tell me what they believe, and then I'd say, tell me the truth. I said, what do you mean that is the truth? I said, really? What's the truth? And I had people dig a little deeper. I have a friend named Byron Katie, and she wrote a whole book just on 4 questions. It was a good little technique she created. She called it The Work. And I want to give you her work as a work assignment for this session. It's really simple. You can only feel a certain way. You can only believe something if you don't question it. So I'll give you an example. When Ron got his job with Willie Deagle, And I don't know if you recall, but if you watched this recently, I'm sure you do. Willie Deagle, you might think is being made up for the camera or hyperactive or acting a certain way. The guy ain't acting. What you see is what you get. Willie fires people so fast it makes your head spin. Willie pushes people. Willie thinks he's, to some extent, kind of like he's taking guys and making them men and women and turning them into Marines, like he's a drill sergeant. And he treats people in a way that most people would not deal with it. Most people would call disrespectful, mean, hurtful, harsh. But he runs in one of the toughest economies, some of the most successful steakhouses in the world, and he has an incredible standard, and his food's amazing, and the prices are right, and he grows like crazy. So he's not everybody's favorite person, especially not people that work for him sometimes. But underneath it, the guy's got a great heart. I mean, he really does. But he's learned this is the way to be, and he lives that way. So Ron is so excited to have this opportunity to go work and take care of his family, but we're deliberately putting him in an environment where he's going to confront everything he dislikes, because Ron's whole life is about work your tail out, appreciate other people, and they appreciate you. But if you want to be stressed, all you got to do in life is expect life to be a certain way that it isn't. Like, expect everybody to treat you nice and respectful. Then you're always going to be stressed out, because they don't always do that, as you and I well know. So here's the point. Ron's stress, this is all about extreme stress, comes from so many different things, but under it all, it's because Ron wants everybody to like Ron. Ron wants everybody to acknowledge him, and his wife's not doing it, and he finds a way to be enough for her. And he's always trying to find a way, but there's nothing he can do to be enough for Willie. And so Ron calls me up, and you don't see this in the show because, again, we've got 44 net minutes after all the commercials, so I'll give you a little inside. And he said, I don't know how to deal with this. He said, I know I got to do it for my family, and I'm going to do it, but the guy's making me insane. I mean, the guy is so mean. He had me doing push-ups. He's trying to humiliate me in front of other people. He's doing everything he can to try to break me. I said, that's his job. He said, you're making him do that? I said, no, we just picked a guy we knew would stretch the heck out of you. And he says, well, he's mean, he's harsh, he's unfair, he's condescending, he's hurtful to people. And I said, you know what? I want to ask you 4 questions. These are the 4 questions I'm going to leave you with as your exercise today. Anytime you're in extreme stress, I want you to try these 4 little questions and see what comes up. Because if you ask these 4 questions and you do what I call the turnaround, at the end of it, you're going to find you're going to have a different meaning in the end. And when you have a different meaning, then the whole game changes. So I said to him, okay, tell me that. Say it again. Make your judgments about Willie. I said, because you used to make these judgments about your wife. What was your relationship like when you said, she should go to work, she should be more supportive, she shouldn't yell at me that way, she should be in a position where she shouldn't just do these piddly little things, she should do the more important thing of getting a job. When you were making all those judgments, what was your relationship like? He said, don't remind me, it's brutal. I said, well, what's it like now? He says, great. I said, how many judgments are you making about your wife? He goes, nothing, I just love her, I'm there to support her. It's not about what she's supposed to be like, it's about what I'm here to give her. I said, that's why this relationship is transformed. That's why you've had a breakthrough in your relationship. Now you got to have a new breakthrough. You got to deal with somebody you can't control, who doesn't love you, who you got to deal with every day. And instead of coming home every day with extreme stress, you got to come home with a different meaning, or it's going to wear you out and wind you down like most people in America and around the world. He says, okay, give me your questions. I said, here's the first question. Tell me something about Willie. He told me several things. He's evil. He's condescending, right? He's mean. He shouldn't treat people this way. So write them all down. And this is going to be your assignment as well. You're going to write down all your judgments about somebody who you feel is creating extreme stress for you. Are you hearing me on this? Because usually it's something or someone. We'll take someone in this particular case. You could pick something, right? Because of the oil spill, I can't possibly feed my children. That'd be a fair statement to make, and yet if you stay with that statement, you have no power and no ability to break through. It's impossible to change your life. A breakthrough is how do you take the impossible and make it possible? Change in perception, change in action, change in strategy. Here's the first question. Is it true? Question 1. Is it true? Is it true that Willie Deagle is condescending? He says, yes. He's evil. Evil. Yes. He's mean and harsh and out of control. Yes, 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 yes. I said, well, let me ask you a better question. You say he shouldn't be. Whenever you make a judgment, you're not just saying a person's a certain way. If you said, Willie Deagle is condescending, that wouldn't be right. Willie Deagle's kind of mean. If it didn't upset you, it would be more just like a statement. It's a judgment when you think it shouldn't be that way. Willie Deagle shouldn't be condescending. Willie Deagle shouldn't be so tough, shouldn't be so mean, all those things. So I said, is it true that he shouldn't be that way? And he said, well, of course it's true. I said, based on what? Based on your beliefs? Based on the universe? Based on God? Based on what? Based on his upbringing, he shouldn't be that way? Based on the way he runs his business, he shouldn't be that way? See, here's the best test of truth. If it's really raining outside, saying it shouldn't rain doesn't really matter. It's going to make you crazy. It's raining, so it should be that way. You have two options. Fight life or accept it. This is how the guy is. You can't change him. You can only change you. So I said, let me ask you a second question, make it better. Can you absolutely know that Willie shouldn't be condescending? Can you absolutely know he shouldn't be so intense? He shouldn't be so mean? Can you absolutely know he's not supposed to be that way in life? And of course, if you're honest with yourself about anything, you can't absolutely know anything. Maybe that's the role he plays in life. He's the drill sergeant, and he's actually made some people much stronger than they ever would have been if they never were with him. Even if they didn't like him, they're stronger as a person. Or because he's like that, he built a business when everybody else is going under with such high standards, he can run it successfully and people get employed and they can feed their kids. Maybe he's supposed to be that way. Now, right now you might be saying, Tony, this sounds like airy-fairy stuff. You've sounded like a lot of good sense until now, but is it true? Is it absolutely true? All I'm trying to do is get you to loosen up that what you think is how life is supposed to be, maybe it's not supposed to be that way, or at least be open to that. The last two questions will make more sense to you, I think, quickly. The third question is this. How do you feel, Ron, when you make those judgments? How do you feel when you believe those thoughts? How do you feel when you have this thought, this belief that says, he's condescending to me? He goes, well, I feel angry, I feel frustrated, I feel out of control, I feel sad. I said, how else do you feel when you think he shouldn't be this way? He says, I feel frustrated, I feel angry, I feel out of control. How do you feel when you think he shouldn't be mean, he shouldn't speak to you that way? He told me all these emotions that made him feel horrible. I said, I can see that. And as long as you hold that meaning that he shouldn't be that way, you'll feel that way. You're not going to change this man. You might influence him someday, I don't know, but right now, you've been working with him for a month and you haven't changed him, and I don't know if he wants to change. I don't know if he's supposed to change. Maybe the power to get rid of extreme stress is change the meaning in your head. Because as long as you hold those thoughts, it's not supposed to be that way. You're going to be angry, frustrated, stressed, overwhelmed, sad. So what's the antidote? I said, well, I'll answer the fourth question. Fourth question is this. What if you didn't have that thought? What if you never had the thought that Willie is condescending? What if you never had the thought that he was mean? What if you never had the thought that he's not supposed to treat you that way? If you never had that thought, what if you didn't believe that thought? What if you didn't believe that he's not supposed to be that way? If you didn't ever have the thought, how would you feel? He said, well, if I didn't feel he was condescending, I guess I'd just do my job and I'd enjoy it. I said, okay. What if you thought he wasn't supposed to, you didn't have the thought he wasn't supposed to be mean? He said, well, I just think, I don't know, I guess I just think he's a tough guy and he's a New Yorker and that's how he gets the job done. How would you feel if you didn't have the thought, Ron? And Ron finally says, well, I feel good. I said, then you should go back to that old thought. He says, oh, I get the idea. I said, no, we've just opened your pattern. Now you got to go a step further. Now you have to do what we call the turnaround. So the first question is it true? Is it true your husband or wife shouldn't be that way? Your children shouldn't be that way? You shouldn't be a certain way. If you're that way, it's how you are right now, so it's true for right now. Can you ever know that that's not ever supposed to have been that way? Have you ever had something happen in your life that you hated, that at the time it was so horrible and you thought the worst thing that could ever happen, and then years later, you look back and you thought to yourself, I'd never want to go through that again as long as I live. I don't want anybody else to have to go through that. But I can see because I went through that pain, man, I've got a strength in me, or I have a caring and a compassion because I know what that feels like and I would never treat another person that way. I can see the larger plan in it now, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years later. Have you ever had that experience? Back then when you were upset, you thought this shouldn't happen. But maybe it was supposed to happen. Your job is to find a way to get good meaning out of it, a meaning that would empower you. And the third question, of course, is how does it make you feel to think that thought, to believe that thought? If that thought didn't exist, fourth question, how would you feel? But then, now he says, well, I feel peaceful. I kind of get it. I said, I want you to kind of get it. Now you got to do the turnaround. Now you got to take all the things you wrote down about Willie, and you got to do a turnaround, which means you got to say it's opposite. So one of them says, and I went through his list, I just remembered one of the other ones popped in my head. He said, he doesn't appreciate me, and he doesn't appreciate anyone, right? So I said, I want you to write the opposite. So he said, well, Willie D goes condescending. I said, what's the opposite? He said, I'm condescending. And so then I said, is it true? I said, I want you to give me 3 examples where you're condescending. He said, well, in my head, I didn't say it out loud to him. I thought, the guy's a jerk. He's an idiot. He's not smart. He's lucky to be here. I said, So the fact that you didn't speak it, does that mean? He said, no, I've been condescending. I've been totally condescending. He's judgmental and mean. I said, okay, turn it around. I'm judgmental and mean. Give me 3 places where you've been judgmental and mean. And sure enough, Ron, to his credit, starts to go, I've been judgmental here or there. He doesn't appreciate me. He never acknowledges me. I said, Ron, that sounds like what your wife used to say about you. And he started getting kind of one of those little giggles inside. Is like, oh God, I don't want to hear this, but I know it's true. And he finally said, oh, you're really getting me now. I said, give me the opposite. He goes, I'm unappreciative. I'm ungrateful. Give me 3 ways you know. I've been going to work with a guy each day, and I've learned so much working there. I learned all these things about a steakhouse. Earlier, Ron had said to me, I even have to do his payroll. And he said, and I've even gotten to learn how to do his payroll, and instead of being appreciating it, I've been thinking, why do I have to do this too? He said, I haven't gone in and thanked him for giving me this opportunity. He said, I haven't even thanked you about it. He said, I've been unappreciative. I've been ungrateful. Now, when you turn things around, my husband's supposed to be, I'm supposed to be. My husband shouldn't be, my wife shouldn't be, I shouldn't be. That person is, I am. And you look for real examples where you're there so it's not BS and you're honest with yourself, the game changes. You can free yourself from the prison of extreme stress when you stop fighting how life is. When you start to look inside and start to inquire instead of blame. Blaming the events, blaming other people, blaming yourself, puts you in a straitjacket where you have no power or control. Responsibility, the ability to respond, comes when you stop the blame game and you step in and start to inquire and question your own thoughts and start to come up with some new opportunities. Does this leave Ron where he's mean and tough? No, it leaves Ron with a new option. The new option is I can go to work and go, that's Willie, that's how he's supposed to be, that's who he is in my life. His role is my drill sergeant, and he's gonna push me and let him push me, and I'm gonna have fun with it. And you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna be grateful, I'm gonna be acknowledging, I'm gonna be the person that I'm made to be. And nothing's gonna change that. And suddenly he deals with the same world and he goes back to work and he's dealing with work from a different place. Now don't get me wrong, this is a discipline. If you don't do this as a daily practice, if you just do it once while we're having this conversation, it'll help you once. But if you can get yourself in the habit of asking these questions, is it true? Can I absolutely know that's how it's supposed to be? How do I feel when I believe that thought? And if that thought didn't exist, if I didn't think about that, if I didn't believe that, if I didn't even have that thought, how would I feel? And what's the opposite? What's the turnaround? What are 3 examples? I think you'll find a way to break out of the illusion that life is controlling how you feel. If Frank can turn himself around and Kristen can turn themselves around, you and I can't. If Ron and Marie, maybe more people relate to, can still deal with what they're dealing with right now. They still have tremendous financial stress. They're both working their tails off. They have kids to take care of. They've got things to deal with. But when I talked to them today, they said the greatest gift in their life is their relationship is like this. Because even though they're dealing with the outside stress, they're not having those judgments for each other. All I want to do with Ron now and offer you and remind myself too, because I teach the stuff I need to remember. You teach what you need to know, is to remember that we all are judges, but when the judgment leads to pain, it's time to question your judgments and maybe open yourself up to some new level of freedom. So here's your assignment. Take someone you're judging, ideally somebody you have an intimate relationship with, or maybe a boss, and put yourself in a position where you write on paper 3, 4, 5 statements that are your judgments, and then take them through the test. And the person I want to acknowledge for this person who I learned this from was Byron Katie. She's also written a book called The Work. You can tap into that as well if you'd like. But regardless, get yourself to question what you've been just accepting. And when you're done with that, I know you're going to feel different. Either write a letter, email a note, ideally write it down to a person and say, I just want you to know I made up this story. The story you're supposed to be this way, the story that you are that way, but I realized I'm that way towards you and I want to apologize. That's your assignment for this week. That's your breakthrough. If you can reverse roles and step into another person's shoes and then come back after you've reversed roles and share with them from your heart the ways that you had judged and how wrong you are, you're going to find that instead of them labeling you as wrong, it'll bring you closer together. And ultimately, the lesson out of this session is really simple. The quality of your life is the quality of your relationships. A deeper relationship, a relationship that's more connected and less separated by judgment, separated by frustration and states, is one that will expand and deepen and give you more than your fair share of love, joy, happiness, and what we all call quality of life. So what was the theme of the show? Well, this is episode 2, and our theme here really was the death of fear. This is about, blame, shame, and the real game of life. We picked this couple because, first of all, I was moved because I could see this man, Ron, was a really good man, but he was broken. And unfortunately, they represent so many people in our country today, and that's why I thought they were so relatable. Here's a man who spent 23 years of his life dedicated to a company, and he wasn't somebody that failed. He succeeded. He was so successful that he was given raises, but when the company had to downsize, and when push came to shove, and this economy crunched down, like so many millions of other Americans, boom, suddenly he was redundant. All of a sudden, there was no job. What I liked about Ron was the fact that he didn't give up. And if you watch the show, he went out and started his own business. You also know that he wasn't successful at that. Starting a business is not always easy, and certainly in these times, you really have to have a competitive edge, and Ron didn't quite have that in the particular area he went to work in. At the same time, when you see this family and you see this man losing his home, losing his life savings, losing his job, losing his sense of identity, and then the worst of all, losing his wife, losing that love and connection they once had, and then maybe losing his children, I had to help. So the question is, what's this story really about, though? On the surface, when we start out, it looks like it's a story of tragedy of a man who's had all these things happen to him. And it is true. Lots of things in our lives happen. Events occur that are outside of our control. Whether you're a fisherman down, working in the Gulf states, or whether you're somebody that gets laid off a job because the whole industry changes, it doesn't matter what it is outside of us. There are things that affect our livelihood, they affect our physical health, they affect our relationships, they affect our families. And so we can sit and feel sorry for ourselves, or we can do what most people do, which is find something to blame. And the problem with the blame game is the person that gets destroyed in that game, the person who always loses, is the person who plays the game. As tough as it is, what we have to do is deal with the cards we're dealt. And what I saw here with this man who was working hard to deal with the cards he dealt, but now he was broken. Because for some reason, even though he'd been resilient, after losing his business as well, he lost his confidence, he lost his edge. And he found himself in a position where it'd be very easy for you to see the beginning of the show and start saying the problem is his wife. Clearly, Marie, she's unfair. She wants him to do everything. She's blaming him. He's tried, he's failed. She's blaming him for everything. She's mad and angry. She's going to divorce him and take his kids. She's being unreasonable. Why aren't they going through this together? But if you do that, you'd be playing the blame game too. And most of us do. What you got to understand is when people are blaming, what they really are is afraid. This was really, to me, about fear. This was really, to me, about showing people that you can't get over your fear till you walk through it, and you can't walk through your fear, you can't face it while you're busy blaming some outside force. Even if that outside force played a significant role in your problem, you can blame BP, and trust me, I think what BP did is destructive and insane. But at the same time, while you're busy blaming him, you got to take care of your family. You got to take back control of your life. You got to have the ability to respond to the situation. So in this man's case, I thought what I got to do is I got to get both of them to stop blaming, because after blame comes shame. In this case, if you really listened and if you really watched, Marie in the very beginning, she's blaming Ron and she's so angry. But really, that anger underneath it comes from hurt, and that hurt is coming from fear. And her big hurt that she talks about is she doesn't want to tell the kids, she doesn't want her neighbors to know they're losing their house. She's ashamed. When you're stuck into shame or blame, you can't make any progress. So the first step for me strategically was to make sure that I got both these people out of the place they were in. Ron is blaming himself, then he's blaming his wife because she's not helping and she's not working. And in this game, everyone's being hurt, there's no progress. So here was the strategy. Let's get them out of their environment, because right now they're living in this environment where they're being triggered. We brought them out to California. Let's put them in a neutral environment and let's get underneath and find out what's really going on with these two people. They're both convinced that their problems are purely financial, that if the financial problem wasn't there, their life would be perfect. Well, our lives might be perfect without problems, but they wouldn't be deep. They wouldn't be rich. We wouldn't grow as human beings. There'd be no sense of aliveness if everything was just static all the time. I tell people all the time, the metaphor I use is people say, I don't want a life that's up and down like this. I want a life that's just straight across. I know how it is. I can count on it. Well, go to a doctor's office and go get an EEG or an EKG, and if it goes straight across like this, as I always tell people, you got a real problem. And that's what happens in our lives too. If we don't keep growing, life shows up to stimulate us to grow. And that's what's happened for this couple. So we brought them, as you probably saw, and we brought them to Malibu, and I had this first session with them, and on the site here, I believe, we'll have the full session where you can see the breakthroughs, where you can see how both these people were busy judging each other, blaming each other, and feeling internal shame. And you'll see exactly how I helped to turn them around, walking you through it step by step. So I think you'll see that progress. It starts out with crazy things where Ron is blaming her as much as she's blaming him, and he's blaming her because she won't get a job, because she won't be responsible like him, like she won't help out. Of course, the more he blames her, the more she fights and doesn't want that job. And the more that happens, the more you end up in a situation where you have an ongoing war where there's no progress. So I kind of broke those patterns. I got Ron to see that telling his wife that it'd be fine. He'd stay home with the kids and do piddly things, if you remember that's the word he used, like take care of the kids. If she would go out and get a job, make $100,000 a year. And we began to break that pattern. The second piece, though, was once they start to respect each other a little bit, we need to build that respect. And when people think about stress, they think about stress from the perspective as something outside themselves, but stress is something physical. The mind does not know the difference between something you anticipate with fear stress and something that actually occurs. And so I thought, you know what? Why don't I find a way to do something that shows them that stress can be exciting? Why don't I do something where I get them to have to work together and support each other? And so we looked for something that would be fun, because it's a TV show also that would get people's attention. And so the first test, are they really committed, was they had to face a fear. And the fear they had to face was they had to get in a MiG jet and fly the speed of sound and take on 5Gs. That process of taking on 5Gs, the physical stress in your body and managing that, not throwing up, not letting go, staying with it, was our first simple little task for them. But then we got to the real stuff. Now that I saw they're committed, they've made some progress in their communication. The big way that you kill fear, the only way you can kill fear, the death of fear is certain if you do what you're afraid of. I know that's overly simplistic, but the best truths in life are so damn simple. It's like I tell people all the time, common sense, this is all just common sense, but common sense is not too common. Most people, if you ever noticed, don't follow that common sense. They don't act on that common sense. People know what to do, but they don't do what they know. So I said, here's what we're gonna do. What do they fear most? Losing their home, becoming homeless. Now, I've had that experience, unfortunately, when I was 17 years old. My dad went back east, I was on my own, and the experience is not something I'd ever want to go through again, but it made me appreciate everything in my life from a different perspective, and it made me strong. And so I said, here's a chance for us to do this, and we worked it out to go to the mission. And we said, listen, we don't want these people taking away resources of other homeless people. Are you cool with this? So we can put the flashlight, the spotlight, so to speak, of NBC on what's happening down here. And the mission was supportive of it. And so we set up the process. And we wanted to make sure that it was real for them. So the cameras were only there for certain periods of time. Then we got away from them, and they were just living homeless. That's what most people don't realize. It wasn't like the camera was there the whole time. There was someone there to protect them. And in fact, when they first got there, when I told them the assignment, I'm sure you saw on the air, they were more than taken back. When I told them, look, you're not going home to New York, you're staying here. Well, they thought here was Malibu, So when we got them down to downtown LA, I didn't just throw them down there. What you don't get to see in the film is, I needed to make sure that Marie felt she could count on Ron. Right now, all that trust was gone. In any relationship, the two things that have got to be there for it to be strong are trust and respect. How do you even know if you can trust someone? You can trust your enemy, and sometimes you can't trust a friend. What's the difference? Well, when you trust someone, you know that your interests are in alignment. If your enemy knows that they lose if you lose, they're going to root for you. And I need to put them in an environment where these two could rebuild trust, where they had to stick together. They have the same interest, protecting one another. And hopefully where Ron would step up as a man in a way where Marie would really appreciate him again, and we could change that dynamic of their relationship. But to make sure that Ron was ready, I first wanted to train him in self-defense techniques, because he's going to literally be on the street where people are coming up trying to sell you drugs, people fight. we needed to make sure that when the cameras weren't there, Ron was ready. So we had him trained in Krav Maga, which is an Israeli self-defense and fighting technique. And you don't get to see that in the show because, again, there's only so much you can squeeze into that short period of time. But he was ready, and thank God he was ready. Because when they made it down there, Marie freaked out. She literally, when she saw the reality of what they were going to be living through on the streets there, she just wouldn't get out of the car. And we had to circle several times with the car because literally there were trucks coming by and so forth. And by the time she finally got out, and Ron got her out, to his credit, they were late. So when they went to go get their bed in their room, the room is with everybody else together, right? It's the room you sleep in with other people that are homeless. They had no beds left. And so they made no exceptions, as they shouldn't have. And so we never planned on it, but their very first night, they're just sleeping literally on that sidewalk. That wasn't some setup. That was the real thing. And that night, there were so many things that happened when the cameras weren't there. Guys coming up trying to sell crack, people coming up threatening, people coming up crazy. And Ron stayed up that entire night, and he kept using his technique. So he had confidence, not because we pumped him up, but because we'd also given him skill. And not unlimited amount of skill, but enough where he was totally certain he could take down somebody who's trying to attack he or his wife. And that strength in him, all of a sudden, Marie began to feel. And I'm sure as you saw on the show, there was a shift in Marie as she began to look around and see, my God, he's here for me no matter what. And that brought them together because that also brought, along with the trust, it brought respect. And what is respect in any relationship? How do you know if you respect somebody? You trust them because you have things in common. You have the same interests. You're looking out for the same things, each other in this case. But the respect comes because you bring something to the table that your partner doesn't have. And in this case, Ron brought this vigilance that she didn't have. He brought this inner strength that in this situation she didn't have. She has plenty to offer him in other areas of life, but we needed to change that dynamic where that respect and trust was back together. And so for days and days living on the street here, they got these lessons. I also wanted to get the lesson that you're always going to be worried about yourself. You're always going to be in fear as long as you're focused on yourself. And so they had the opportunity to come in and help inside, feed people, clean, do things of that nature, serve. And what they began to find is that life is really, really painful when all you do is sit around and think about your problems. But even if you're not doing something that's exciting, but you're doing something that's meaningful, or you're doing something to help, there's a reward in the effort. You know, most people want all the rewards without the effort, but effort is the reward. And they began to experience this. And they would lit up most during that week. Again, we couldn't put it all on camera. And some of these little interactions that occurred where they were helping somebody out and they saw this light back in that person's eyes and they felt like we might be on the street, but our life really matters. We can make a difference. And watching them make a difference for each other. What was beautiful is Marie, who was ready to quit the relationship now, has fallen deep in love with her husband. He's feeling this strength that he can make a difference. He was the broken man, remember? He was the guy that thought nothing he did worked. And now on the street where it really matters, he understood that he could really truly make that difference. So there's a bunch of clips that you can look at here, but I think the most important part of the show didn't make the show. That's just the truth. It's the most emotional part of the show. I think it's the most valuable part of the show, but there's only so much you can do in 44 minutes and have a storyline. And that is this. After we got Ron and Marie and they got the lessons down there in Skid Row, we had interesting experiences down there where people were going to vote whether they stayed or left, and that was not staged. I told everybody there, it's your vote. If you think they got the lessons, stand up. If you all stand up, they go home. If even one person doesn't stand up, they stay here for another 10 days. There was some stress between Ron and Marie during that time, stress within our crew about whether this was the right thing to do. And what it really did, it created pressure on Ron and Marie to kick things over the edge and take what they've learned inside themselves, and they really did. But here's the part that didn't make the show. This is the story behind the story. And you'll be able to watch this clip, and I really encourage you to do this. I found out that Ron had not spoken to his parents in 5 years, either his mother or his father, and he used to be super close to them. And then all of a sudden I understood why Ron was such a broken man. See, it's one thing to lose your career and your income and your savings and maybe the business you start, but when you lose your wife and kids and your home, but you lose your wife and kids, now you're getting down to the core, and Ron had nowhere else to go. He didn't have a mother or father or somebody else that he could connect with, and that's why he was broken. And I found out that there was a lot of upsets between the two of them, and I thought, how many families are there in this world where people have said something or done something or offended somebody in the family, and then people just don't talk for years? It's unbelievably painful and destructive. So I told Ron and Marie I was going to meet them back in New York at Marie's sister's house, which they both love. And I met them outside, and I said, listen, I really want to understand, is there anybody else? We're going to invite some of the family over. Is there anybody who's not here that, we should invite? And they said, well, no, my sister and a few people, that's it. And then I took him inside, and there was Ron's parents standing there. And they, were pretty emotional themselves. So you'll see the clip. I won't tell you all the details, but all I'll tell you is there wasn't a dry member, and then members of the crew in that room. Because almost everybody has had somebody they really cared about where they felt some separation from them. And watching this family heal and seeing, again, the blame game that we play. Marie and Ron's mom had some conflict in their interpretations of each other. But the truth of the matter is, everybody loved everybody. It was just all these perceptions, all these blame and shame games that were going on, and we broke through them all, and the transformation in Ron, it brought all his strength back, because now his family was really healed. The rest of the show, I won't go through. You've seen the show, the elements that are there. I will just tell you that if you think that we just gave Marie a job, she went on 18 interviews. No one gave her a job. She got that job for real. And if you think that Ron got some wonderful job, we gave him an opportunity. But working for Willie Deagle, that guy's not exaggerating. The guy, if you ever go to that steakhouse, you'll see he is insane. He is completely, he did things that we knew if we showed it on the air, people would think it was a setup. He had Ron doing push-ups to show that he was really committed. He had Ron carrying, a big piece of beef across Manhattan, literally running down the sidewalk to see if he would really gut it out. I mean, this guy, we didn't put in the show because you go, that's all BS, that you'd never do it. He does that to his employees. So Ron has done it. So where are they today? Well, you can click on and see a little clip from them. They just recently went to Unleash the Power Within seminar. We had a 1-year reunion for all the families that went through the show here, all 6 families. And so you just hear a few moments. And the biggest thing is not even what people say. It's look in Marie's eyes and see if that's the same woman that you saw in the beginning of that show. And Ron's eyes as well. I think you'll see the difference. But he got his job. He's working his tail off at the steakhouse. They're together in the relationship at a level like they never dreamed was possible before. They've made themselves, their family, and their kids first. They've told the kids the truth and enrolled them. This is a winter time. It's not forever. But during the season, we've got to be smart. They still find a way to do well. They don't have enough money to pay off all their debts, but they're not losing their house anymore. And they're making progress like most Americans. So I'm really, really proud of them. The core of their relationship, which is the thing we wanted to change, when they got reunited, when they stopped blaming, when they stopped shaming each other, and they came together, that has not changed in a year. In fact, Marie was telling me the other day, she said, Ron is a better man for me. She says, I hope I am for him too, but he is a better man for me than he ever was in the beginning of our marriage. This is the best it's ever been. She said, I feel so supported by him. And Marie has a job, is taking care of the kids, and it's summertime right now, but when summer ends, she's gonna get a second job so they have enough money, and she's looking forward to it. She's excited about it. The direct opposite of where the game changed. So if you're wondering, does this last? Take a look at the clip, you'll see where they are now. But most importantly, for the story behind the story, watch the piece that didn't make the show, which is, this intervention. If you know anybody, or if there's anybody in your family that's not talking to each other, put on a link, send a link to this and have them watch this. Maybe you watch in advance, and you'll see that this is something that will get people to start to realize how we make up such stories about each other, and we separate ourselves from people that we love, and it's just not necessary, and there's a tremendous freedom when we turn it around. So that's the story behind the story. I don't know how long this is. There is no script here. It's me cutting loose with you with the truth. If you want to take my little mini course, each week I'm also doing like a 20 to 40 minute piece that is, here's what the show's about, and here's some tools that you can use. Here's some exercise you can do to change your life, improve your life, or help somebody else. Then just sign up with your little email over there to that mini course that we've got, and you can do that at any time as well, and you can go through any of these. If you've not seen the show, or if it's really touched you, please pass on this link. There's a button somewhere you can push, and you can pass this on. You can watch the show on Hulu, and I hope you'll tune in for next week's show. Thanks for listening, thanks for participating, and continued breakthroughs to you. Live strong and live with passion.